Hey everybody, so I just wanted to jump on here and leave my review for Babylon. This is the latest film written and directed by Damien Chazelle. Damien Chazelle is no stranger to the cinema, as he has given us a lot of critically acclaimed films over the past few years, including Whiplash, First Man, and of course the Oscar favorite La La Land. Now he's back with his most ambitious and biggest project to date. You can tell just by the cast and everything that's happening in this movie, this was the biggest budget he'd ever received. This movie is also just about 3 hours and some change long, about the same runtime, if I'm not mistaken, as Avatar: The Way of Water, which I had seen both, not back to back, but in a short period of time between both. So I was starting to feel the runtime of these movies, and I'm thinking, damn, movies are getting longer and longer. Not that that's a bad thing, but here I am thinking, okay, as long as it's keeping me engaged from start to finish. Now, mind you, this movie gets going right from the start, and I will give it that credit right away. It keeps you engaged the minute it starts, with a lot of things being thrown at you, whether it's drugs, sex, or even excrement. I'm not kidding. This movie gives you everything and more. It is bombastic. It is out there. It is loud. It is wreaking havoc from every single frame. And it's a wild time. I will say Damien Chazelle really just, pushed the envelope a little bit further and was like, I'm going for it. I don't care. I'm going for it. I got the budget. I'm going to give you everything that I can, as much as I can in one film. It's a wild time. Now, in case you're not familiar with what Babylon is about, it's set in the early 1920s to mid, 1920s of what Hollywood was looking like at that time. The social scene, the film industry, and kind of that merge between silent films to talkies. And we're kind of getting right there where they're crossing over. And what's interesting here is that this film is not afraid to really just showcase just the nitty-gritty of what was going on at that time. Now we have an all-star cast. We've got Brad Pitt. We've got Margot Robbie. We have a newcomer named Calva, who is wonderful in the film. Gene Smart, and a whole bunch of other supporting cast members, even cameos from like Olivia Wilde to Tobey Maguire. The movie is wild. Now, mind you, this movie is not perfect. I think this movie has a lot of issues. And that isn't to say that the movie isn't worth your time. I do recommend that you do check it out just for an initial viewing. It's one of those movies I don't think I would ever return to frequently, but I might want to watch a second time just down the road because there might be things that I missed that I would like to pick up on for another viewing. I will say the parts about the movie that I did enjoy are a lot of the sequences. I laughed quite a bit. I think from the first half of the movie to the midway point are a lot of fun. From the midway point to the end, I'm not saying aren't interesting, but they kind of stall, and you start to feel the runtime a little bit more, at least in my opinion. For a movie that's over 3 hours long, you don't want to feel as if it's 3 hours long, and this movie kind of does that for you. There are a lot of emotions that go throughout this movie, while it is sort of a satire and really just giving you an embellished look at what Hollywood was. Not saying that Hollywood didn't look that way, but it's clearly exaggerating itself the more the movie goes along. It's really fun, it's entertaining, but it also can feel stagnant at times. Now, that isn't to say that Damien Chazelle doesn't do a wonderful job here. Given what he has and the amount of money that was put into this project, you could see the passion. You could see just how excited he was to put this movie together and tell this story. Yes, but all that being said, the movie does have its faults, and I think the movie could have benefited from maybe being a little bit shorter. I don't think the movie needed to be 3 hours long. I think the film could have benefited from 2.5 hours. There were a lot of storylines that were interesting, but I don't think were relevant or necessary. And while I do love that the movie is very diverse with its cast, we're kind of getting storylines from here, there, just kind of all over the place. I don't think the movie needed to give us all of those storylines wrapped into one movie, because some, while interesting, are not as exciting as others, and therefore the movie just kind of feels like it's prolonging just to stretch a plot out, longer than it needed to. So I do think there are a lot of notable things about the movie, and I do recommend that you watch it for certain moments and certain elements of the film. I will say this is probably my favorite movie with Margot Robbie to date. Now, if you know me, I have talked about Margot Robbie very openly. I don't think she's a bad actress. I actually find her very charming. But there are certain movies that she's done in the past few years where I feel like they've been safe choices, like Bombshell or Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I'm not saying she's bad in those movies, but sometimes I feel like those are just really filler positions, roles that could have gone to anybody, but they kind of just stuck with Margot Robbie because she's becoming a big name. She is a big name now. And they just don't really... They're not worthy of her talent, in my opinion. But this one, she kind of gives it her all. She goes out there. She's loud. She's eccentric. She is like angry. She's crying. She's emotional. She's a range of different emotions. And it was wonderful to see her in that. So I will give her that credit. Brad Pitt's good, Diego Calva's good, the whole cast is really fun. But again, I think certain storylines just make the movie feel lackluster at a certain point. We no longer really care to kind of go down that avenue, or at least for me. I was like, okay, this was interesting for a while, but what was the point of showcasing that person's storyline if it wasn't too relevant to the main point of the film? But overall, I do, again, think the movie is worth checking out, maybe at least for 1 or 2 viewings. But it's not something I think is going to go down in history as the best movie ever made. It's certainly not going to make my top 10 list of the year, but it is an experience. I can give it that. It is a pretty wild and out there experience that I'm recommending just on that alone. So if you have seen Babylon, I would love to know what your thoughts were. Did you think it was just as crazy as I did? And did you also find it kind of lackluster in certain parts? Let me know in the comments below, and let's talk about this because I'm very intrigued to get everyone's opinions on how this movie made them feel.